Hey, my little sinners and saints. Today we're going to talk about the Alaskan serial killer. It's a wild one, like always. So let's jump into it. Let me get my little avatar. The dense and rugged Alaskan wilderness provided the perfect cover for a fierce and sadistic killer. He preyed upon women by kidnapping them, then raping them, torturing them, and he hunted them like animals for his own twisted pleasure. In the 1970s and 80s, people went to Alaska to look for a fresh start to reinvent themselves or to disappear for a while. Some of those disappearances weren't by choice. The former head of the FBI, Jim Colstrom, in New York office said that a serial killer's rampage was exposed when two bodies of young women began turning up in shallow graves that dotted the Alaskan wilderness. The killer was at home in the rugged terrain, but the hunt for him began 3,000 miles away, where FBI profilers mapped the criminal's mind. She was a hopeful young model looking for her break. She accepted a job with a man who claimed to be a photographer, but turned out to be a merciless killer. She was his first victim or his last. From the 70s through the mid 80s, the wilderness of Alaska became a popular destination as people flowed north to construct the Alaskan pipeline. The population boomed. On August 13, 1982, two off duty Anchorage police officers were hunting moose near the Connect River in a wilderness about 20 miles from Anchorage. Let me get to them. This is a sadistic story. This is the two off duty officers. As they made their way through the dense forest, they happened upon partially buried human remains that were left undisturbed. The next day, the crime scene came out with the technicians from the Alaskan State Troopers arrived at the scene of the crimes, and out here fell under the state jurisdiction. Okay, let me. This is the girl's body that they have found. I was pretty sure that that's the reenactment gal, but just so for reference points, this is the actual one that they found. And they had found her boot. I think this is a picture of the boot. So they called out the state troopers, forensic team. Besides clothing and an elastic bandage, state troopers only found a 223 caliber shell casing in the shallow grave. In the sand, they had to use dental records to identify the remains of the 23-year-old, which was Sherry Morrow, an exotic dancer reported missing a year earlier by her boyfriend. State troopers called him in to break the news. Her clothes matched the ones that was reported. Her clothes matched the ones that was reported missing. And she had a lucky charm that she wore all the time. It was a gold arrowhead pendant. She never took it off. Mara was probably murdered shortly after she had disappeared, giving the killer more than a year to cover his tracks. Finding him would be next to impossible, In the next year following the discovery of Sherry Morrow's body, more women began turning up. It's the sad truth that finding bodies in the Alaskan wilderness was all that but unusual. 2 or 3 times a year, some novice hiker or hunter would get lost and succumb to the elements. But the growing numbers of the bodies had a different story to tell. During the new road construction in September 2nd, 1983, a crew unearthed a human skeleton remains. That was the picture we looked at earlier. And this was not far from the body of Sherry Mara's, where they found her. The bones had obviously been there for some time, yet until recently, the area of the Connect River was so remote that it could not be accessed by boat or light plane. The remains were identified as 17-year-old Paula Groening, an out-of-work secretary who moved to Alaska from Hawaii. She had been missing for 5 months. Like Miss Morrow, she had taken the job as an exotic dancer to make meets in. And like Sherry, the 223 caliber cartridge was also found at the site. For Alaskan State Troopers Wayne Von Clausen, the connection was frightening. And that was all about everything about when everything started to become kind of scary for everybody because the profile was the same that they were topless dancers from the clubs downtowns. So he was murdering strippers. And I got a picture of that too. But there was certainly, but that was certainly when there was a belief that the serial murder out there, 2 bodies had been found, but now troopers believed that there could be more and began to revisit missing persons reports. Many of those reported missing were exotic dancers, but in Alaska, the disappearances were not unusual. Missing persons were relatively low priority statutory because there could be dancers that come in and then they jump on a plane and they leave. So, it's not really missing. They left and went somewhere else. Trying to keep everything straight. I don't know why my pictures are not in order. This was the second girl, by the way. She's 17. I ain't gonna lie, she does not look 17. And this was the state troopers trying to get stuff together. This is some of the names. There were a lot of instances where these girls would jump on a plane and just go away. Between 1980 and 1983, 12 women had been reported missing. That the only a fraction of the unreported total. Troopers now wondered how many of these missing women were victims of the killer, and it would be difficult to determine. The Alaskan State Troopers sent the evidence from Sherry Marla's and Paula Groening crime scene cases to the FBI's laboratory in Washington, D.C. for analysis. The FBI ran the ballistic test on both of the shell cases to see if they came from the same gun. State troopers hoped that the results could provide them with a strong evidence that the same person committed both murders. The lab results were conclusive. Both women were killed by the same high-powered rifle. There was no doubt Alaskan troopers were dealing with a serial killer. While they began their hunt for him in the wilderness, the Anchorage police were dealing with their own problems. Every city has its dark side, and Anchorage is no different, except that in Alaska, the nights are longer and darker. In the 70s and 80s, Anchorage was a frontier town. Men came there to work hard, and the women followed to ease their loneliness. Some of the women were lured from the strip clubs. Others were looking for respectable opportunities. They worked in the clubs until they could get up enough money or find a better job. Some of them were prostitutes. And so they started worrying about that he was picking up prostitutes. And guess what? He was picking up prostitutes. His victims were hardly missed, or in the city made up of largely of strangers, it was difficult to be a missing person. Some of the women who disappeared from the Anchorage turned up safely. Some did not turn up at all. But disappearances weren't the only crimes being reported on the early morning of June 13th, 1983. Cindy Paulson, age 17, ran down an Anchorage highway. She was partially dressed. I had to edit this picture because I didn't know if underwear was an issue with YouTube. Um, she was partially dressed and handcuffed. She managed to flag down a passing truck. She was running. She Sorry, I got a new thing and I've got on to change the way I got on position because I'm an idiot. She was running for her life. The motorist dropped her off at the hotel that she was staying at. Um, and she went, the desk clerk had seen her get dropped off, and so she called the police department. Miss Paulson, when they came there, they removed the handcuffs and tried to calm her down. Anchorage Police Officer Greg Barker recalls the incident. We found her in handcuffs with very little clothes on. She was real credible. She was very scared, very frightened, and she told us her story. Paulison, the prostitute, told Baker that she was picked up by a trick that night before she described him as a wiry scruffy, about 6 feet tall, wore glasses, and had a stutter. He was not the kind of person she thought of as threatening. This is pictures of her answering the door of the cops. But as soon as she stepped into the car, he handcuffed her and put a wood handled revolver to her head. They drove to his respectable, and they used the word respectable as in, his place, theirs, things like that, not as he's got a respectable residence. But they pulled into his respectable residence neighborhood. He pulled her into his house. Then he placed the place was well kept and full of hunting trophies. He had a chain hanging from the ceiling of his den. He claimed that he was not going to, but he did chain her up. Then he stripped her down and she was tortured and raped repeatedly for hours. Then he went to take a nap, leaving her, but he wasn't through with her yet. He was going to take her out of the cabin into the wilderness. He said if she tried to get anyone's attention, he would kill her. And then, as well, he told her he already had an alibi worked out for his friends, be willing to lie for him, that nobody would believe her story. They ended up at the airport. He had a plane, and when she seen him getting into the airplane for a minute, that's when she took the chance to run. And then that's when the guy had picked her up and dropped her off at the hotel. Then the police came. Well, she drove back by to show him the plane that he was getting into. But she also saw her chance to escape, um, which saved her life. Officer Baker said that she had very good street smarts about her. I had a very street smart female scared to death with the story about being taken at gunpoint and the prisoner at a specific location that she described. It was when they went to his home because the guy come out that owned the place here, the airport, and give them the information of the guy that owned the plane. Um, they ended up going to his house, and as they were sitting there staking it out, he pulls in. They get out and talk to him. Um, this is actually the woman that escaped, not actually, but the reenactment of the woman. But turns out he was a baker. So he would, and he owned his own business. So he would have his own alibi. Oh, I was at work, all this stuff. And he had a stutter. Now, this is the actual person, I think. They showed it different. So to me, but he hunts all these animals. They were all over his house in the reenactment. This was the prosecutor, Rothschild. So a little conspiracy shit in there. And so they tried to talk to the prostitutes and let them know, and that there was this guy out there that was killing women, and ask them if they had any kind of encounter with him or anything, and also let them know. They run his background. He did have sexual abuse. They called in the FBI because they knew that the FBI would be able to do things that they couldn't, like analyze stuff, get more, like wiretaps, things like that. This is the guy that worked on the case. And this is a picture of a prostitute flagging down a car. There was an incident where he had followed a lady up to her apartment and tried to kidnap her at her door. And this was Paula Golding. And when they went into his house, they didn't really find anything, and they didn't find the chain hanging from the ceiling. But so they had came back, and this time they found this little black box. And in the box, they found a map that had a shitload of little dots all over it in Alaska. So not only was there the two that they found, then the one lady got away, plus now they've got all these dots that they don't know about. And so they went up in the attic. And that's where they found the gun because they had looked for the gun before and they couldn't find it. And a neighbor come over and told the FBI agent, "Hey, look, he wanted my husband to lie and say that he was with him on that night, and he really wasn't." And so she had to go down, and the husband had to go down and tell them, "Hey, this was all a lie." But this is the pendant. Sorry, the screenshot sucked. But that's the arrowhead pendant they found up in the attic as well, um, off of that one victim. So, and I think this is one of the victims that got away. I don't know. Can't remember. Sorry. I'm not really good at this, am I? But he would tell people he was going to take their pictures, that they were beautiful, the old routine. You should be a model crap. And he would tell them, I'm going to meet you at IHOP. I'm going to meet you at McDonald's. And he would go and he would get there early to see if somebody dropped him off and they waited for him, so that he would just go on if somebody waited for him. But if not, then he would get them in the car and he would take them and abuse them, so, rape them, everything, and then put them out into the wilderness so he could hunt them. Finally, they showed him all the evidence. He admitted to everything. He told them that there was more, but he wasn't going to tell them where. And this is the actual gentleman right here. And of course, he got life in prison without parole, because I think Alaska is one of the weenie states that don't kill people. Well, thank you for watching, and I'm going to do another video here in a minute, and then I'm going to find a sadistically crazy kind of story to entertain y'all with. You see my eyebrow? Rock and roll. Okay, she didn't do that well. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for joining me in my craziness as always. And I will talk to you later. Bye.